West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
From gallows to gaslight, developing overnight, Mike Pence, history boy. He was in the middle of history on January 6th, the day insurrectionists were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." They were yelling to kill him in order to overthrow an election. Donald Trump and the rioters wanted him to unilaterally defy the election results. Mike Pence refused to upend democracy that day, although he had to run it by Dan Quayle first. That is the history, known to all who saw it and all those who have written on it, including Bob Woodward and Robert Costa in peril. But in a remarkable moral and historical contortion, the former vice president, Mike Pence, is now trying to redirect the blame for the insurrection.
I know the media wants to distract from the Biden administration's failed agenda by focusing on one day in January. They want to use that one day to try and demean the character and intentions of 74 million Americans who believed we could be strong again and prosperous again and supported our administration in 2016 and 2020.
Pence telling it like it isn't. Again, from gallows to gaslight. The media wasn't chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." The insurrectionists were, the people there to overturn the results of an election, to ignore the will of 81 million voters and do worse to him.
Pence goes on to talk about his relationship with Trump.
You can't spend almost 5 years in a political foxhole without developing a strong relationship. And, January 6th was a tragic day in the history of our Capitol building. But thanks to the efforts of Capitol Hill police, federal officials, the Capitol was secured. We finished our work. And the president and I sat down a few days later and talked through all of it. I can tell you that we parted amicably.
What part of all this do you think they talked through exactly? How Trump wanted to use Pence as the centerpiece for his attempted coup? Or maybe they talked through what Trump said at the Stop the Steal rally?
And Mike Pence is going to have to come through for us. And if he doesn't, that will be a sad day for our country.
Maybe they talked through the tweet that Trump sent during the breach of the Capitol, during the breach, where Trump said that Pence didn't have the courage to protect the country.
Joining us now, CNN senior media reporter Oliver Darcy and CNN political commentator S.E. Cupp. S.E., look, Pence makes it seem like this is some matter for Architectural Digest. It was a problem for the Capitol building on January 6th.
It is grating to me the way he continues to talk about January 6th as if it happened to him or like around him, as if he wasn't a part of how we got here. Look, the people who got up that day and chose violence, right, chose to go and commit a crime at the Capitol, did so for Donald Trump, but there was a whole apparatus that got those people there. That apparatus included some Republican lawmakers, some right-wing media, and Mike Pence was part of that apparatus too. So it's very confounding to watch him deflect and act as if this was an event in history he was completely divorced from.
It's a media problem, he says. It's a media fixation.
What isn't, though, really, today, right? I mean, if you ask a Republican, it's all our fault. We've done it all.
Right. When all else fails, attacking the media is the easiest thing for these guys. And obviously, Pence has no other way to explain this away, so he quickly pivots in that interview with Hannity to attacking the media. It's not surprising. And, obviously Hannity was the chief propagandist throughout the administration, and so he's very used to attacking the press, and they both seem to use that as a way to move on.
I will tell you, the record is what the record is. As I said, the history is the history. It doesn't matter to an extent what he says about January 6th for January 6th's sake. It matters for now. It matters for what is being done with it now and going forward, SC. So why is this?
Well, first, I mean, the whole thing sounds a little delusional, not just the way he talks about January 6th, but also parting amicably with the president. The president has been trashing him. He might be saying we're in a good place, but per usual, the loyalty flows just one way. Trump is not returning the favor. So you have to wonder, okay, if Mike Pence is trying to stay on Trump's good side, well, he'd have to be there to begin with, and he's not. He's not on his good side. And what is this for? Does he still want to raise money? Does he want influence? Does he think he's running for president one day? There are no natural Mike Pence voters. He lost Republicans like me who felt betrayed by Mike Pence for not being a stopgap. And I think the Trump loyalists will never trust Mike Pence. Who is left? Who is clamoring for more Mike Pence? So this strategy, if you can call it one, makes very little sense to me.
I mean, that's why he's on Hannity, right? Because he's courting those folks that he doesn't, as you say, who is the constituency here. He's trying, but in a logical world, what would happen is Trump would apologize to Pence, right? Because of what happened.
You mean on Earth?
On Earth. Here on
Earth 1.
On Earth 1.
Earth 2, right.
Now on Earth 2, it's the other way. It's Mike Pence, as so many Republicans who decided to break with Donald Trump a little bit around the insurrection, he's now sucking up. He's on the full suck-up mode.
Right, and what he's saying actually does make some sense if you watch right-wing media, because in right-wing media, January 6th wasn't an insurrection. It has been portrayed as, people just going to the Capitol and seeing things and police taking selfies with the protesters, or, that's how it's being portrayed in right-wing media. And so for him to go on there and to downplay it makes sense if he does want that future in Republican politics. Whether he actually has one, I tend to agree with SC. I don't see who the natural Mike Pence voters are, but it seems that he's trying to court them on Sean Hannity's show.
Yeah, he doesn't have to go on Hannity. He can retreat and retire to private life and pretend in his own mind that he wasn't involved in any of this. But he is actively pursuing a spotlight again, and again, I'm not sure why.
What bothers me most is bigger than Mike Pence, which is that if you say it didn't happen the way we saw it happen, if you say it doesn't matter that it happened, then what you were saying is it's okay if it happens again. And that's my biggest concern right now, is that everyone is dumbing down history so much, you are creating a permission structure for this to happen again.
For sure, but I think most infuriatingly about Mike Pence and why he's such a disappointing character in all of this is he's trying to split the baby. He has said this was a very dark day
for the building
in America, right. In American history, and he has lamented what happened. He said he was proud to certify Vice President Joe Biden as president. So he's trying to kind of have it both ways and acknowledging what a lot of Trump voters you're talking about will not, which is what happened that day. I'm not really sure what the master plan is, because he's constantly contradicting himself.
I do think, though, if you do pay attention again to the right-wing media world, after January 6th, there was a lot more, in the immediate wake, there was a lot more, permission structure to say this was not good, and condemn these people. But over the past, 10 months, it has really been watered down, and what happened has sort of, you're watching Tucker Carlson and some of these programs, it has really been whitewashed what happened on January 6th. And so now maybe he's realizing that, hey, like, if I actually do want this future in Republican politics, it's no longer acceptable to say what happened on that day. You have to kind of excuse it for, excuse these insurrectionists.
That's dangerous.
Yeah, but they don't care. I mean, they have shown no interest in caring about the well-being of the country, right? For the past 4 years, they made up excuses after excuses after excuses. So it's not really surprising that they're not paying attention, maybe, to the health of the society.
Well, and I have to say, I mean, people fixate on the fact that, like, these people were calling for Mike Pence to be hanged, right? And how can he sort of, reconcile that? But if it makes any sense, it's worse. These people were calling for the destruction of American democracy. It wasn't just personal to make it awful. It was awful for the country. That should have been enough reason for Mike Pence to
He knows that.
completely disavow.
Pence knows that.
Yeah, certainly did at one point.
Everyone knows it. Everyone knows it.
It is Tuesday, the 5th of October of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It always has, and it always will. Yes, spice. Hey, we also have a special guest here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We've got Ginger, the little Yorkshire poodle, and she's got a little bit of separation anxiety, as I have explained previously, about my mom still being in the care home for a little bit more time. I dropped off a few things for her yesterday and was able to wave at her through the window. Stupid me, I should have just been talking to her on my phone, because we were trying to read lips through a closed window, and it's one of those kind of like reflective windows, and it was a little hard to see. Anyway, she's looking better, and my sister mentioned something about her being discharged. Now, we think that it's just being discharged from the COVID ward, and we don't know if that means that she'll stay in that facility or they'll move her to another facility that doesn't have a COVID ward, because the reason that she's in the COVID ward that she's in is because that was one of the only a few in the region. Don't ask me why. I mean, we're spiking with COVID infections. People are dying right and left. But apparently the Republicans, and that's just a nice way of calling them Nazis, those who have taken over local government at all levels, seemingly are ignorant of the danger of a pandemic, because they act like it's all fake. It's just stupid liberals. They don't have any reason to be alive, telling us what to do. All right. That's why they're Nazis. All right. We are trying to accommodate people because they look American, but they're effing Nazis. So, yeah, Mike Pence, you think we're putting 73 million, some odd million into the Nazi category? Well, you know what? You put them there. You are responsible for it, Mr. Big Tobacco, and your lies. You lied and you lied and you lied, and these people believe your lies, and now they're the good Nazis. The good Germans. We call them good Republicans, the base. Al-Qaeda. Jesus. They even drive around in trucks with big old flags and a lot of rifles and arms, even 50 calibers and Stinger missiles. Just like ISIS. Just like it. Okay. They're the base. Al-Qaeda. So here we are. Mike Pence on an apology tour. Oh, yeah, they were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence, Mike." And it's the media. It's the media's fault for stoking all this division. F you. God. I do not believe that nicotine is addictive. Remember that, Mike? Do you? You were right there, telling them in their ear what to say. everybody knew it was a lie. Just like we know that the lies that are being perpetuated right now, the big lie. The big lie is not about the stolen election. The big lie is the Nazis telling us that up is down and down is up. Everything that we know about America is no longer true. Court precedent? That's for liberals. And liberals are not allowed to exist. That's why they're Nazis. We're not talking about eliminationism, and they accuse us of it all the time. Socialism. Give me an effing break. I wish we're about as socialist as, Eisenhower, but you called him a commie too, didn't you? That's how far to the right they are. They're so far to the right, they are Nazis. And their Rasputin, their big intellectual brain, Steve Bannon, was even too fascist for the Italian fascists. They kicked him out of Italy. If you're too fascist for the Italian fascists, I'm telling you, that says something. So don't talk to me about the socialist agenda. Hey, how about a little bit of America here, asshat? I remember watching these kinds of scenarios in dystopian science fiction movies from the 70s. Very familiar. Yeah. Soylent Green is people. Well, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy as we start off? Well, of course, that mob chanted, "Hang Mike Pence," and now Mike Pence is blaming the media. Oh, yeah, we would have never had an insurrection if the media would just, stop reporting on the investigation. Yeah, that's what you would like, Mike. Because even though you seem to be a sympathetic character in the midst of this storyline with the mob chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," you were up to your neck in it. And it was going to be the night of the long knives. Yeah, that was when anybody who might have threatened the leadership of Adolf Hitler found themselves dead. So you were caught up in a night of the long knives, Mike. Just like the good Republican, just like the good German of old, you're going to be a Vichy Nazi, aren't you? You think that's going to save you? Mike, you got to look at history. It doesn't matter whether you believe in precedent or not. Precedent exists anyway. Okay, on the rest of the menu, behind-the-scenes workers on Hollywood films, camera operators, makeup artists, all those people, and television shows, voted to strike if they cannot reach an agreement with producers on a new contract. Because apparently these studios are making money hand over fist by pretty much just not even having a theatrical release and just putting it straight to streaming. And unfortunately, no one is covered for revenue generated, profits made, and put into the pockets of only the producers from the streaming services. Interesting. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources dramatically scaled back the number of wolves hunters can kill during the fall season, and that was in an open defiance of its own policy board. And in response to threats against election administrators across the nation, legislation has been introduced to broaden protections for election workers, their families, and the actual physical polling locations. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the top U.S. envoy brought up the Jamal Khashoggi murder in talks with the Saudis. And Mexican President Andres Manuel López Obrador said Mexican nationals in the Pandora Papers should be investigated. Notice the silence here in America? Telling, isn't it? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly, for doing so. And also thank you and Ricky for attending Netroots Nation coming up. All right. Netroots Nation 21. We will be there virtually, since it's another virtual convention, as it was last year, and you know why. But we will be reporting from Netroots Nation and snagging the interviews and, well, just giving you a flavor of all that is going on once again this year. So thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Ricky. If you would look across the page to the left from that chat room link, you'll notice the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could afford to send us, well, how about the equivalent of what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink? If you could send those funds our way, what we do is that we put that money into a big kitty where we have money already that we have put in from our own wallets, by the way. Yeah, we do that. Some business model, huh? So with those funds, we are able to pay our bills. And that is very important in this society, because when you pay your bills, pretty much you can fly under the radar. And if you're resisting the Nazi takeover of the United States of America, you got to fly under the radar. They have a way of, well, shutting that whole thing down, right, Aiken? We'll get to him in a little bit. Anyway, we are then able to fulfill our civic duty because of your generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended, oh, so many years ago. But really, all kidding aside, the bills are going up. And we thank you who have been so generous, and we'd like to give a little pre-thanks to those who might consider being generous sometime soon in the future. Yes, soon. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple. You just go to @Netroots Radio. You can find us on Facebook, too, when they're on. So, yeah, what happened? Did it take them a whole 6 hours to scrub whatever it was they were scrubbing? I wonder. Will we ever find out? We might. Anyway, yes, find Netroots Radio on Twitter @Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. And you can follow me on Twitter @JusticePutnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that posted up on Twitter and that other social media platform when it's on. And yeah, so do that. You can also follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest. And do please pick up podcasts for all Netroots Radio shows by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Apple Podcasts. I don't know if that's different than iTunes. I don't know. I can't figure it out. But it's there. And also on Deezer. Don't forget about Deezer. Yes, indeed, Deezer. Oh, yeah, Todd Aiken. You know, the guy talked about legitimate rape and how a woman's body just has a way of shutting that whole thing down. He died at age 74. Doesn't seem so old to me anymore. 74? What was wrong with him? People will say, like my grandson would say, well, he died of old age. Yeah, well, wait until you're almost 70, pud. Of course, I used to think, well into my 40s, oh, well, somebody in their 70s, they lived a long, fruitful life now, didn't they? Not long enough. It's not. Okay. Am I afraid of death? That was a question that was posed the other day. Afraid? Are you kidding me? Might make me pissed off. Not afraid. Okay, this first offering here. Are we having metaphysics in this salon? Well, it is a salon. We can do anything we want, and we do. So let's get back to the curated part of the show to just, give a little linear thrust to the storyline today. And Jill Sargent of Reuters brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Save some room because we have a couple of amuse-bouches back at the chef's table after the break. So just giving you a little hint. All right. Camera operators, makeup artists, and other behind-the-scenes workers on Hollywood films and television shows voted resoundingly to authorize a strike if they cannot reach agreement with producers on a new contract, their union said yesterday, Monday. The International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, also affectionately known as the IATSE. Would that be IATSE? IATSE? We'll see. Which represents some 60,000 off-screen workers, said that 90% of its members cast ballots and more than 98% of the votes returned were in favor of authorizing a strike. The vote strengthened the hand of the IATSE leaders, installed contract talks with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, affectionately known as AMP-TP, at least here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The two sides will meet today, Tuesday, in the first contacts for 2 weeks. A union source said after the results of the ballot were announced, it's not clear whether the meeting would lead to a full resumption of talks. I hope that the studios will see and understand the resolve of our members, IATSE President Matthew Loeb said in a statement. If they want to avoid a strike, they will return to the bargaining table and make us a reasonable offer. I don't know where I come up with these accents, but this one's, it just comes naturally. Our people have basic human needs like time for meal breaks, adequate sleep, and a weekend, Loeb said. Doesn't he know how Hollywood works? You're supposed to be up at 3:30 and, all made up and everything. And then you work all day. You sit around sometimes, but you work all day into the late at night. What about all the people who have come before? What about them? The union is seeking to reduce working hours that can stretch to about 14 hours a day, as the demand for TV shows and films has increased, particularly for streaming platforms such as Netflix, Disney+, Apple TV+, and Amazon Video. It also wants raises for workers on streaming projects who get paid less than for work on mainstream and cable TV shows under an agreement signed in 2009 when streaming and online media was in its infancy. The AMP-TP, the producers, said in a statement it was committed to reaching an agreement that will keep the industry working, but said it would require both parties showing a willingness to compromise and explore new solutions. Well, you know what a new solution might be for the producers? Less than 14 hours a day, not more. Todd Richmond of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources officials dramatically scaled back the number of wolves hunters can kill during the state's fall season in open defiance of its policy board. The move marked another clash between the DNR's liberal-leaning administration and the conservative-leaning board, and it came after animal welfare advocates sued in state and federal court to block the hunt. The season is set to start November 6. The DNR's move left board member Greg Kazarmiski flabbergasted. He said state law makes clear that the board directs and supervises the department. They are not free to do that, Kazarmiski said. They've gone rogue, is what they've done. Well, the reason they had to go rogue is because the number was set last year. And hunters just went out there and killed about 4 times as many wolves as they were legally allowed. And the conservative-leaning board didn't do diddly. Department biologists originally recommended setting the quota at 130 wolves, saying they were uncertain what effects the state's unprecedented spring hunt had on the wolf population. The policy board bumped the limit to 300 animals in August, prompting outrage from conservationists and wolf advocates. The DNR announced in a news release yesterday, Monday, that it was unilaterally moving the quota back to 130 animals. Under treaties established in the 1800s, the state's Chippewa tribes can claim up to half of the quota. But the Chippewa consider wolves sacred and won't hunt them. The DNR said the tribes have claimed 56 animals, leaving state-licensed hunters with 74. Well, boo-hoo-hoo. DNR spokeswoman Susan Hoy said the department has a responsibility to manage wildlife scientifically, pointing to agency regulations that grant the department that authority. The 130 wolf quota will protect the wolf population as a whole, she said. The wolf hunt has morphed into one of the most contentious wildlife management issues Wisconsin has faced in decades. State law requires the DNR to hold a hunt between November and February, whenever the animal is not on the federal endangered species list. Conservationists have maintained for years that the overall population is too fragile for hunting. The DNR's latest population estimates, compiled during the winter of 2019 and 2020, put the number of wolves in the state at around 1,000. The state's management plan calls for 350 wolves on the landscape, although DNR officials dispute that's a population goal. The Trump administration took the final steps to remove the Great Lake wolves from the endangered species list in January. The DNR was preparing for a November season, but hunter advocacy group Hunter Nation won a court order forcing the department to hold a February hunt. The group argued that the Biden administration could put wolves back on the endangered species list at any moment, robbing hunters of their season. The DNR rushed the season framework, setting a quota for state-licensed hunters at 119 wolves, and hunters blew past the limit, killing 218 wolves in just 4 days and forcing an early end to the season. Linda So of Reuters brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A U.S. Senator introduced legislation yesterday, Monday, to broaden protections for election workers, their family members, and physical polling locations in response to a Reuters investigation into threats against election administrators. The Election Worker and Polling Place Protection Act aims to make the workers who help administer America's elections safer, from officials to volunteers and the contractors who set up and maintain voting equipment. The protections would extend to family members of election officials and prohibit threats of damage to polling places, tabulation centers, or other election infrastructure. The measure, sponsored by Georgia Democratic Senator John Ossoff, cites two recent Reuters reports about threats of physical harm and death against election workers across the country, from senior officials to volunteer poll workers along with their families. The barrage, fueled by Donald Trump's ceaseless false claims that the 2020 vote was stolen, has continued nearly a year after the November election. There have only been 4 known arrests in response to the threats and no convictions. That's what happens when you stack the courts with Federalist Society judges now, isn't it? Threats of violence targeting election officials and polling places are threats against our Constitution and the right to vote, said Ossoff, who was elected this year. At this moment of peril for our democracy, my bill will strengthen federal laws protecting election workers and polling places from violent threats and acts of violence. Now, of course, the Republicans have been telling their people to go to the polling places with guns and intimidate people. I'm sure they're not going to like this law. The measure has no co-sponsors now, but a spokesperson for Ossoff said the senator will seek bipartisan support. Good luck with that. Proposed legislation must pass hurdles in committees, the Senate, House of Representatives, and conference before becoming a law, and many measures do not succeed, especially with Mitch McConnell, the Grim Reaper, who presides over the graveyard where democracy goes to die. All right, let's go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, the ayes have it. Ask those over a certain age what they remember when they hear the name Tammy Faye Baker, and chances are they'll say her eyes. Hence the name of the movie, The Eyes of Tammy Faye. Even by drag queen standards, Tammy loaded up on the makeup, especially around her eyes. Some would also remember that for a period of time, she was one of the most hated women anywhere, symbolizing the worst of 1980s America and the worst of religion, greed, excess, and hypocrisy. For those that don't know, Tammy and her husband Jim Baker were pioneers in the religious TV business. Their North Carolina-based TV ministry took in millions from viewers before Jim was eventually convicted of various fraud charges. Tammy herself was never charged, but somehow managed to gather more ire than her husband, becoming the punchline of many late-night TV jokes that mocked the couple's downfall. However, she did live long enough to achieve a comeback of sorts in the early aughts and was seen as an LGBTQ icon until her death in 2007. As the film portrays, behind the clownish exterior was a woman who maintained core Christian beliefs in love and charity, not excluding gay people, which was shocking for the time. Jessica Chastain, who stars and produces here, elevates the film above standard biopic fare and makes you feel empathy for her complex character, especially as things come crashing down. She nails the Minnesota accent as well as the charisma that helped Tammy relate to so many. While the supporting cast is effective, it's really Chastain that carries this one, and while it's impossible to know what the real Tammy would have thought of the Eyes of Tammy Faye, it's likely she would have appreciated the capture of her humanity behind the public caricature. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Shayla Farzan. A couple billion years ago, about 3 billion to be a little more precise, the Earth was a very different place. It had vast oceans and almost no oxygen in the atmosphere. It was a place where bacteria ruled. Some of these bacteria used photosynthesis to power themselves, kind of like plants, but they did it in a strange way, by harnessing light and stealing electrons from iron. Fast forward about 2 billion years, and those bacteria still exist today. They're called photoferrotrophs, and for decades, scientists thought they were pretty rare.
Most people think that, these are exotic organisms that do other things, and photoferrotrophy is just something that they might have retained from the past.
Arpita Bose is a microbiologist at Washington University in St. Louis. In 2015, on a whim, Bose collected some vials of marine sediment from Woods Hole, Massachusetts, and brought them home to her lab in Missouri. Her students slowly parsed out the individual strains of bacteria, and they started testing them one by one, trying to figure out if any of them still had that ancient metabolism. Bose still remembers the day 2 of her students came into her office with the results.
They were like, they all do it. They all do photoferrotrophy. And I was like, what? No way. No way. I was kind of shocked.
All 15 bacterial strains were photoferrotrophs. Maybe they started thinking this trait wasn't that rare after all. The study appears in the Multidisciplinary Journal of Microbial Ecology. A big reason why they care, beyond just basic scientific curiosity, is the fact that these microbes are vacuuming up carbon dioxide as they photosynthesize.
If this is truly as common as our data suggests they are, it's possible that these organisms do make a massive contribution to carbon dioxide fixation as well.
And that means preserving the wetlands and estuaries where these bacteria thrive could be an important component of combating climate change. Right now, those habitats are rapidly disappearing, says Michael Guzman, a microbiologist at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and one of the study co-authors.
These environments are a hotbed for biological diversity. And so there's a lot of things happening in these environments that we still don't know about. So I think preserving these natural microbial communities is really important.
For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Shayla Farzan.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As fall turns to winter, the flu season will be upon us in force. The best way to avoid influenza is to get immunized. Everyone 6 months and older should be vaccinated. Those at increased risk for flu complications include children under the age of 5 and adults 65 and older, people with chronic health problems such as heart disease, asthma, and diabetes, and pregnant women. To get your annual flu vaccine, see your healthcare provider or go to a pharmacy, grocery store, or clinic in your area. If you get influenza, talk with your healthcare provider right away about antiviral medication. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets and you. You are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
The events of January 6th were part of an attempted coup.
Listen up. This matters. I'm Louis Black, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
As described in detail in a new book by Washington Post journalists Bob Woodward and Robert Costa titled Peril, Trump's lawyer, John Eastman, advised Trump that he could remain in power despite the election results and wrote the now famous or infamous memo that laid out for Trump how he could do that. Eastman argued that the vice president has enormous power on how, which, and when electoral votes will be counted, and thus, in effect, the power to decide the election. Eastman argued in part that Pence could delay the certification of the Electoral College votes until certain Trump loyalists in state legislatures could change those states' votes. That was part of the plan. Pence's loyalty to Trump has been on full display throughout the administration, but playing a critical part in a coup, Pence wouldn't do it. But some vice president might. And some state legislatures might well appoint electors who could thwart the will of that state's voters. And the Electoral Count Act of 1887, which governs procedures, has numerous ambiguities, which allows the possibility of political machinations to install the loser as the winner. What we have learned recently is that our democracy is more fragile, less certain than we have thought. As the title of the recent New York Times editorial put it, January 6th was worse than it looked.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union because freedom can't defend itself.
Most people believe the American economy is rigged by and for bankers, CEOs, and other super-rich elites because it is. With their hired armies of lawmakers, lobbyists, lawyers, and the like, they fix the economic rules so ever more of society's money and power flows uphill to them. Take corporate CEOs. While 2020 was somewhere between a downer and devastating for most people, the CEO class made out like bandits, with each of the 3 top-paid corporate honchos pocketing as much as $1 billion in personal pay. Are they geniuses or what? What? All 3 of their corporations ended 2020 with big financial losses and declining value. So how can such mediocrity produce such lavish rewards? Simple. Rig the pay machine. Today's corporate system of setting compensation for top executives is a flim-flam disguised as a model of management rectitude. On its face, it sounds good. Pay for performance, it's called, meaning the CEO does well if the company does well. But who defines doing well? The scam at most major corporations is that the standard of corporate performance that the chief must meet to qualify for a huge payday is set by each corporation's board of directors. Guess who they are? Commonly, board members are the CEO's hand-picked brothers-in-law, golfing buddies, and corporate cronies. So they set the bar for winning multi-million-dollar executive paychecks so low that a sack of concrete could jump over it. This is Jim Hightower saying, well, can't corporate shareholders just vote no on any executive excess? Yes, but corporate rules decree that votes by shareholders are merely advisory, meaning top executives can ignore them, grab the money, and run. The system is fixed, and we need to break it. Howdy-ho, folks. Thanks for tuning in and sharing my weekly commentaries. Also, please join me for a live web show I host every other Tuesday, the Hightower Lowdown Happy Hour at the Chanted Cafe. You can join the action live online as I chat with grassroots leaders and progressive sparklies from around the country. Go to hightowerlowdown.org/chatandchew to find out about upcoming guests and watch past episodes. That's hightowerlowdown.org/chatandchew.
I'm Rick Smith.
and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1886. That was the day Henry George accepted the nomination to run for mayor of New York on the United Labor Party ticket. In cities across the country, trade unionists met to found state labor parties and to hammer out political platforms for local and state elections. In New York City, ULP advocates issued the Clarendon Hall platform and nominated Henry George as the ULP candidate for the mayoral race. George had gained prominence with the 1879 publishing of his book, Progress and Poverty. In it, he addressed private land ownership as the basis for inequality and advocated for a single tax system. At New York's Cooper Union that evening, where thousands of supporters gathered, George addressed the crowd. He presented the ULP platform of higher wages, shorter hours, better working conditions, government ownership of railroads and communications, and the end to police repression. Burroughs and Wallace described the scene that night in their book, Gotham, A History of New York City to 1898. During his speech, George declared, quote, "This government of New York City, our whole political system is rotten to the core." He argued that politicians had made a trade out of assembling votes and selling them to powerful interests. What business got in return was police protection, lax enforcement of housing and health codes, friendly judges, and fat franchises. To purify the political order, working-class voters had to sever ties to all the established parties and choose from their own ranks. For a party that had just been founded weeks before, George came in second. But like its sister organization in Chicago, the New York ULP would split over issues of socialism within a year. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Expecting a high of only about 70 to 71. We've had days in the mid-80s, but we are in fall. And it looks like partly cloudy skies this morning will give way to occasional showers throughout the day and throughout the night. Expecting, about almost a quarter of an inch of rain starting late this morning and continuing throughout the night. Winds will be out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour and should have lows tonight in the low 40s and winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Sunshine and clouds mixed tomorrow with a slight chance of a rain shower, highs in the mid-60s. Brr. And it looks like we might get some more rain at the beginning of the week, so let's keep our fingers crossed. We need it. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon now stands at 219,071 confirmed cases, with 282 confirmed deceased. Ragweed pollen is rated moderate right outside the window here in Rogue River, and I got to tell you, it's made my voice or throat quite scratchy. The air quality index for the region, though, is good at 28 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate at 4. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.92 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 92%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 58 and partly cloudy. Paris is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. Rome is 75 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 58 and fair. Kabul is 63 and clear. Hong Kong is 82 degrees and clear. Tokyo is 75 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 62 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 55 and mostly cloudy. And New York is 62 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Anonymous staff at Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A U.S. delegation led by White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan brought up the death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in talks with leading Saudi Arabian officials last week. A senior U.S. official said yesterday, Monday. Sullivan, Middle East envoy Brent McGurk, and other U.S. officials met in Riyadh on September 28 with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and other top Saudi officials. The main point of the talks was to discuss the conflict in Yemen and ways to arrange a ceasefire. But a senior Biden administration official who briefed reporters about the visit to Washington this week of Israel's national security advisor said the U.S. Delegation also brought up the case of Khashoggi specifically and human rights in general. The Saudi government has denied any involvement by the Crown Prince, but a U.S. intelligence report concluded in February that bin Salman had approved of an operation to capture or kill Khashoggi. U.S. President Joe Biden has worked to recalibrate U.S. relations with Saudi Arabia after the friendly ties his predecessor Donald Trump had with bin Salman and other Saudi officials. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said in a statement on Saturday, the third anniversary of Khashoggi's death, "We have taken steps to prevent such a reprehensible crime from happening again, including launching a coordinated effort to prevent and respond to any government targeting journalists, activists, and dissidents beyond its borders."
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
And anonymous Reuters staff brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Mexican President Obrador said yesterday, Monday, he was in favor of investigating Mexican nationals who appear in a series of documents released as part of the so-called Pandora Papers. Several major news organizations published details from a massive new leak of financial documents showing heads of state serving and former government officials and business leaders with stashes of offshore wealth. The use of offshore companies is not illegal or by itself evidence of wrongdoing, but news organizations in the consortium said such transactions could be used to hide wealth from tax collectors and other authorities. Some 3,000 Mexicans are named in the files. López Obrador, swept to power in 2018, pledged to combat corruption in a nation plagued by a history of rampant graft and impunity. Okay, let's do it here. Then that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we'll meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.